Yeah, it got added.
Hey Todd, we're getting ready to start.
All right, we've got 6 o'clock on Monday. We're going to have a Gardner City Council work session. One discussion item, which is to discuss the 2015 through 2019 capital improvement program. And there's a lot of background information that was included in the council discussion form that I'm going to trust that most of you have already read, or certainly have access to. I believe we've got copies in the back of the room. But I do want to know, want everyone here to know, we're very excited about this. Everyone on the governing body is in favor of public input. So we're thrilled to have so many people interested in the capital improvement plan. Now, I will say, we won't be taking any action tonight. If we approved a CIP after receiving a great deal of input like we did tonight, shoot, we got a spreadsheet with 384 rows included in it. But if we were to approve the CIP after receiving that kind of input, we'd kind of only be paying lip service to people that have actually attended some meetings and put some input together. And also, I mean, if we don't really want to make wholesale adjustments and then vote to approve it, because then we wouldn't really be doing the kind of due diligence that I think the citizens expect of us. So, as you probably saw in the council discussion form, we've kind of laid out a capital planning schedule for January, February, and March of next year to include the items that we've already got and that you've already discussed. But by the time March rolls around, we should be in a position to approve a CIP that doesn't just include what we've got currently, but also is going to have information in there that we didn't have at this point about pavement management, water and wastewater, and electric utility needs. So, with that, we're going to begin with a presentation. We've got David Warm with us this evening. He's the Executive Director of the Mid-American Regional Council, and he's just here to provide some information on capital improvement planning, specifically, what it is, what it does, why it's important, and since he's with the Regional Council, he's going to spend a little time talking about the significance of capital improvement programs to regional planning. David's actually been with the MARC since 1990, and prior to that he was the City Administrator of Liberty, Missouri, and also served in administrative positions with the City of Kansas City, Missouri. He's a fellow with the National Academy of Public Administration and a previous Walter Scheiber Award winner from the National Association of Regional Councils. Not trying to embarrass you or anything, David. But David, if you could come forward, I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's my pleasure to be here and provide a little bit of context about capital improvement programming as you head into this pretty important decision-making process here in Gardner. Before I begin, I just want to thank you for your active engagement in regional affairs. We've had excellent participation at the administrative level as well as at the political level in regional affairs from Gardner for many, many years, and Mayor Morrow is continuing that participation as an alternate to our board of directors, and we appreciate that. What I would like to do is just take a few minutes and kind of answer basically three questions, and the mayor's already teed those up pretty well. Briefly recap what is a capital improvements program. Secondly, to talk about why one is important, and third, to talk about what makes a capital improvement program effective. And so to begin with the first question, exactly what is a capital improvement program? This will be familiar to most of you on the council, but I'm just going to tee this up so that everybody's terminology is sort of the same, and you've got the context. It's often referred to as capital improvement plan or program. Those generally mean the same thing, or a CIP. It's simply a plan for investing in capital assets over a period of time. Typically, as yours does, most capital improvement programs extend over a period of 5 years or more. And it typically will include investments that help you achieve broader community goals, broader objectives in your plan, as well as broader service strategies. There's typically a distinction between a capital improvements program or plan and a capital budget. Typically, the capital budget is sort of the first year of the plan, and the budget is typically often prepared somewhat in advance of your budget cycle and then is adopted as part of the formal legal budget document that you adopt every year as part of your statutory and fiduciary responsibilities. The capital improvement program is a pretty reliable guide for the future, but one should expect it changes over time. You might think of it as a revolving list of priorities, so that as you complete one set of projects, you just take it out another year, or occasionally circumstances change or opportunities come along and the council then needs to lay out a plan. But it typically can provide a pretty reliable roadmap of where you're trying to take your investment strategy. In terms of what is in a capital improvement program, that can vary a lot. Capital projects are typically big ticket items, things that cost a lot of money or last a long time. Most councils will set a threshold for what qualifies as a capital expenditure versus what qualifies as an operating expenditure. Typically, it's no less than $5,000, often it's $10,000 or $20,000, all depends on the size and sensibilities of the city. There's really no magic formula there. It's just sort of arriving at what you think is a significant enough investment that you need to plan for it for a long time ahead, and you expect it to last a long time. I should note, and I think it's important to realize that capital improvements programs don't always include just the investment, but the things that lead up to the investment. So a lot of times capital expenditures will require plans or engineering studies or the acquisition of property, or you'll build a building like this and you've got to equip it with furniture. Typically that first time expenditure of even small ticket items, because they're aggregated and become a single large expense, are included in an overall capital improvement program. And so there's, as you've already indicated in your capital improvement programs, as in most, it covers the gamut of the kinds of expenditures that cities need to attend to. It'll include water and wastewater, including water supply and distribution, water treatment plants, your sanitary sewer systems. You don't have a treatment plant, I don't believe, but you certainly have, oh, you do, and so you certainly have a network of pipes and other facilities that are a part of that. Stormwater facilities, streets and sidewalks and trails and bridges, all of those kinds of assets, all of the community facilities, city halls, police departments, fire departments, parks and recreation facilities, swimming pools, kind of a pretty big list of capital items. Often overlooked is telecommunications and technology. Increasingly, we're investing in police systems, radio systems, public works systems, technology systems. Some cities build out networks of their own. Others are Wi-Fi systems connecting different public facilities. All that kind of thing requires advanced planning and pretty big expenditure of resources. In your case, you have a special responsibility with energy utilities. Not all cities have that responsibility, but that's a bigger issue to be addressing, power plants and distribution systems. And then finally, there's all the equipment, all the rolling stock, all the public works equipment, all the police cars, all the fire trucks, all those things that keep a city humming. And so it's those kinds of expenditures that are typically included in a capital project. So why is it important to have a capital improvement plan? And I think it's helpful to think about this specifically as why is it important to have a separate process for planning and budgeting and financing capital projects versus how you do it a year-to-year operating as part of your annual budget. And the first reason I would say is that the stakes are just really high. Capital stuff is just really expensive, and it lasts a long time, and when you make a decision, it lasts years, many years, decades, and doing it right once is really important to meet your fiduciary responsibilities. It's just important that you do the kind of planning and legwork and methodical thinking through and scheduling things out that allows you to make the right decisions for the very long haul. And that is usually a process and a decision-making system, a flow of decisions that is somewhat different than the kind of decisions that you make as part of your annual operating budget. The second reason, then, is kind of related to that, is that the level and types of expenses that you make in a capital plan vary widely from year to year. In your operating budget, you are incrementally improving this, you're changing that, you're investing this stuff. It is all sort of on the margins of change that you're trying to make. A capital plan can vary widely because there's such big ticket items. You could have a lot of capital expenditures one year, not so many the following year. Or they may vary that you're working on buildings one year and equipment the next year. And the decisions around that change a lot. You know, for instance, you build a building like this, once every 100 years, right? You don't do these kinds of, or 50, I don't know, whatever it is, but just once in a while. And so you have to put all of your organizational and institutional energy in developing the resources and doing the thinking and doing the planning to do this kind of investment right. And that's similar with almost every capital expenditure. It's a different flow of decision-making, a different level of technical analysis, a different kind of planning, and it doesn't occur very often. And so doing that in a separate process, apart from the annual budgeting process, is usually helpful to making better long-term investments. The third kind of reason that I would sort of highlight for why it is helpful to do this separately from the budgeting process is just that the implementation of a capital project takes such a long lead time. These projects that you're conceptualizing typically will take a minimum of 3 years and often as long as a decade, particularly if you're tying into other sources of funding. It takes a lot of staff time, it takes a lot of political energy, and so to be able to think those through and pace those out and schedule those so that you can manage those sort of ahead of the game is really helpful to making the right decisions over the long haul. You also often with capital improvement projects, more so than with operating projects, have to work with people around you. Water districts, your neighbors, the county, state governments, federal governments, and so syncing up your decision-making and projecting those in alignment with your neighbors or other political jurisdictions is just a really important feature of doing the pre-planning you need for capital work. And then finally, the fourth reason why it's really important to have a good, solid capital improvements program is just the money of it all. The amount of money often requires you to accumulate money over a long period of time. Sometimes you have to borrow money, and more often than not, you're trying to match money from other levels of government or other resources, and that takes a lot of time and effort. One of the things about capital programs is that the decisions about money often don't rest just with this governing board. They rest with another jurisdiction, they rest with the regional process, they rest with the state government. And unless you have a feeling for what you're trying to do 3, 4, 5 years out with some level of specificity, it is hard to position yourself for some of those resources. So for instance, once a decade, the state of Kansas will put together a road plan. And if Gardner's not at the table saying, these are our 5 road priorities and this is when we plan to do it, it's hard to kind of put your projects into that mix. Cities and counties from all over the metropolitan area come into our offices, and once a year they put together a process for investing federal funds in roads and bridges and transit systems all over the region. And it's really important that you have some sense of where you're going to be 4 or 5 years out, because we're programming that money 4 or 5 years out. And then what happens a lot of time is that we get to year 3 and one city or another isn't ready to go for some reason or another. And so they're looking around for the next projects in line. And so having the ability to have projects in the pipeline, plans in place, their next set of priorities in place is just really helpful to your positioning yourself to take advantage of those funding opportunities. And so that's kind of why I think it's really important. I think most cities think it's really important to not only have a plan, but to have a planning process that is related to but distinct from the annual operating decisions that you have to make year to year for your budget. And so let me just end with a couple of thoughts that may be helpful as you not only deal with this particular capital improvement program, but as you think about how you do your planning over the long haul. There's sort of 4 reasons, 4 characteristics I think that make an effective CIP. And the first of which is that an effective CIP is connected with the plans and the visions and the goals that you have adopted and are trying to achieve. You have lots of plans as a city. Every city has them. The CIP doesn't exist for its own sake. You aren't building stuff just for its own sake. You're building and buying stuff to get results and to make a better community. And the vision for that better community is expressed in a variety of plans. You have a comprehensive plan is probably the most important plan that you adopt. You probably have a downtown plan, or you may have a streetscape plan, or you may or may not, but many cities have an annexation plan, or a growth plan, or you'll have an economic development plan, or you'll have a stormwater management plan. And so you want to make sure that your capital improvements program is supporting that plan. And the higher degree of congruity between what you're spending and where you're trying to go, the more effective the plan will be. The second thing that is typically evident in a good capital improvements plan, an effective capital improvement plan, is clear policy guidance that comes from the governing body. That can be everything from financial objectives or cost-sharing objectives or a threshold of what is a capital project and what isn't. Typically, over time, you don't necessarily have to start with this, but typically over time, the council will lay criteria or develop criteria in advance of project selection so that you can sort of be clear to your technical staff, to the general public. These are sort of the filters that we're using to make decisions, whether you're trying to meet environmental standards or federal regulations, or whether you have a maintenance first policy. A lot of cities will start with a fix-it first policy, and that will be the guidance that goes into their capital improvements plan, or whether you want to match private investments at a higher level than if there aren't private. There are those kind of policies that over time you may be thinking about putting on the front end of your planning process so that it can help filter and guide the decisions so that you're not only aiming towards your plans, but you're also upholding the policies that you have as a governing body. The third element of an effective CIP is that it involves the general public, and you're doing that tonight, and reflects the public input that comes not only from meetings like tonight or public hearings, which are important and bring value, and they're very pointed and helpful to the governing body, but you have public input embedded in a lot of information that you have in front of you. Your comprehensive plan, for instance, probably has months of public input and engagement and really is the reflection of a lot of public information. Your boards and commissions are really important venues for getting thoughtful public input into your capital improvements plan. It's very helpful, and I think you probably have already engaged your planning commission in evaluating and helping to shape and comment on the capital improvements plan. The annual citizen surveys that you do help you understand what citizen priorities are and what their concerns are. Or when you're designing a particular public improvement, you're out in a neighborhood or out in a business district talking about the streetscape or talking about the configuration of the road redesign. All of that kind of stuff is public input that is important to be reflected in the CIP, in addition to the formal hearings and public dialogue that you have on the list of project itself. And then fourth and finally, and this is really an important point, an effective capital improvements plan relies on technical tools and analytical information. So you spend a lot of money on engineering analysis. You spend a lot of money on doing assessments of your water plant and your electric utility. You have a pavement management system that is helping you systematically evaluate and rate the condition of your roads and your trails and your sidewalks. All of that information is just really important as a building block to make sure you're putting the money where it's doing the most good and getting the kind of results that you're trying to get out at the fine end. So the point is, an effective capital improvements plan isn't just about what's in the comprehensive plan. It isn't just about criteria on the front end. It isn't just about public input or about technical studies. It's about weaving those four building blocks together and balancing them and working them off of one another and continuing to look out 4 or 5 years so that you can govern well and Gardner can grow well. It's a really effective and important strategy to have in place. So with that, I would just say congratulate you for taking the time and doing the hard work to create a long-term investment strategy. I think it will pay off for you in the long haul, and it sounds like you're approaching it in exactly the way that is necessary to build an effective program. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to respond to questions, or I'm happy just to observe the rest of the program.
Well, certainly, and I know that we want to make sure that we have plenty of time for public input.
Sure.
But you are welcome to stay as long as you would like. I'm sure we've got a lively council meeting on tap for right after. You know, if you're feeling nostalgic, you're certainly welcome to stay for that as well. But some of the folks that are here, maybe they've got a question that they'd like to direct towards you. So if you don't mind hanging tight.
Happy to.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ted.
Yeah.
So at this point, since we want this to be an interactive conversation, I would be glad to entertain community input from the podium. If you've got comments, questions that you'd like to ask, just approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and we'll see what you've got to say.
Hello, my name is Debbie Hickman, 848 South Sumac in Gardner. For those of you here that may not have a copy of our plan or our questions, we have them at the back table if you didn't get one. Raise your hand and we'll have one come out, brought up to you if you like. Staff, I'm sure you all have copies. Okay, first of all, we want to say thanks for the opportunity to address and be able to interact with the City Council. There's not really another venue for us to find all of you sitting together in one spot that we can kind of hopefully have your attention for a while. I want to thank the mayor and some of the council members who offered to be available for us when we were putting together our meetings. We just kind of felt like we had to do it ourselves to begin with. So thank you very much for understanding if we declined your offer to attend our first two meetings. Staff, if we're questioning or if we're saying we don't know if we're behind one of your projects that may be near and dear to you, please don't take it personally. We're asking questions. There's probably things that you can tell us, you know, that may help us lend some support. So please don't take it personally. Tonight you're going to hear and you'll see in the paperwork that you have in front of you the phrase, the citizens attending the meeting or the citizens in attendance. This is to make it very clear that we're speaking tonight on behalf of the 32 individuals who attended one or both meetings. We do not begin to imply that we are speaking for every citizen in Gardner. So we just want to make that clear, so that we're not trying to represent something that we're not. One citizen who attended our first meeting, a new face to all of us, a new name, that's always kind of exciting, kind of wrote something after our first meeting that kind of summed up the feeling of those in attendance. At the citizens meeting, there was a variety of people with varying backgrounds, many of whom had specialized expertise professionally in the fields related to some of the CIP projects. While we recognize it's impossible to provide full details until a bidding process is completed on some of the projects, we felt that the CIP could contain more detail than was provided in the 15-19 plan. More information in the proposals would lead to less confusion when they are read by the citizenry. An informed citizenry is an engaged citizenry, and they will be supportive of a vision that enhances and promotes this wonderful community. We all agreed that that's something we wanted to read so that you could hear that tonight. We chose to address the 2015 CIP projects first because we felt that those were the most important, so to speak, because approving a CIP is probably going to bring about some action immediately on some of those projects. And I believe you answered a question that we had next was, the CIP that was published with the agenda is not the complete CIP plan, it's just what we have now.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good, okay. Our next question was, we see that the rating for the priority is not available on the projects. While we're sure there's probably some kind of priority ranking system in your project numbering and things like that, we're a little unsure as to how to interpret the priority ratings, and hope that maybe when you answer in writing our questions, that you'll be able to help us understand how you're rating those particular projects in terms of what's to be done first, second, third, from your expertise. Okay, I'm going to talk just a little bit briefly about the administration. We tried to mirror your CIP plan so that hopefully it made a little bit of sense. The first under administration is City Hall improvements. You all have lumped together 5 different items that we really think need to be addressed separately as items on the CIP. They may be related to City Hall, but we feel like they're unrelated sometimes to each other. The first is your City Hall exterior maintenance. The citizens in attendance expressed their need of additional information on the proposed exterior maintenance. Real quick, you've got the questions in front of you. Basically, what we're trying to look at is what specifically is being done, what's the cost, and what am I gonna get for that money? We're interested in preventative maintenance. Are preventative maintenance performed in the areas that you're asking for improvements? Does the city maintain records of preventative maintenance? We request that you provide specific details necessary to fully assess the scope and impact of the proposed work. The key milestones of this particular project should be identified, especially regarding which items are anticipated to be a one-time expense versus which items are ongoing expenditures such as routine facility upkeep. We understand that safety and liability associated with sidewalk failures and fully support these repairs, but just give us a little more specific information on the scope of the project. But we fully support anything that has to do with a safety or a liability issue. Installation of glass at the front counters. This is a hard one when you get a group of people together that we acknowledge that there's two sides to the thought of a concealed carry issue, which brings about the installation of glass item. As a group, we did agree that the expenditures associated with the changes in the concealed carry legislation are expenses that the city council has chosen to occur. We're not deciding if those are right or wrong decisions, we're just saying we've come to that agreement as a group. And as a group, we agreed that more information is needed. We just want a little more clarification on glass. It was written in quotes. What does that mean to us? What's the description of glass that you're putting? And it said it should be a one-time cost. Should be, words like should be kind of raise our eyebrows just a little bit. We're just wondering. What other improvements will the city need to make in regards to the choice made by the city council on the issue of concealed carry at City Hall? And what anticipated costs are associated with additional improvements? We don't see anything on the out years. We don't see anything going down the pike as to what else are we going to have to do to comply with legislation based upon our decision. And if you could please indicate what years the additional improvements will be performed. So we just want to see a little bit bigger picture of that item. Strobes and horns for City Hall, fire upgrade systems to protect the citizens and staff, fully supported when needed, fully supported. Just have some questions. What method of emergency notification does our current fire system alarm support? We're wondering, do we have we have horns and strobes now? Has this upgrade been required by a recent fire department inspection or a safety insurance audit? And if yes, is it possible we could have a copy of that report to review? And what, if that's not the case, then what prompted this for 2015, the strobes and horns being updated for City Hall? Are our current insurance rates affected negatively because we don't have this upgrade? And will we see a decrease in insurance rates because we've upgraded our horns and strobes? Again, we fully support anything with safety. Can you give us just a little bit more information, please? Upgrade needed to the City Hall HVAC system to improve efficiency and reduce costs. We just feel that we have an incomplete description of the HVAC upgrades and the explanation of, again, some savings. That word some savings raises our eyebrows. Does not give us enough information to, again, assess the scope and impact of the proposed work. What specific upgrades proposed, what savings could be realized, and are you able to provide HVAC maintenance and PM logs? We're requesting specifics as we're unable to evaluate this expense without the given information. Security improvements at City Hall, we were unable to determine the justification for this expense. What specific security improvements are being addressed in this project? And what are the security improvements necessary at City Hall? We kind of feel like this is $20,000. We don't know what you're doing with it. We're just asking for a bit more information. I've got another person who's going to come up and go over the Parks and Rec scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
My name's Bruce Hughes, and I live at 322 East Colleen Drive here in Gardner. And as Debbie indicated, I'm going to just briefly go over, there's 3 items under Parks and Rec for 2015 that were included in the 2015 year for the CIP. And those were the senior center, the low water crossings on the Greenway, and the West Side Park improvements. Starting with the senior center, you know, the interior, I think it was phrased as the interior improvements to the senior center as needed, and it was to include kitchen cabinet and counter replacement. And of the citizens in attendance at our meetings, you know, there was a good consensus that the additional details about what these improvements are and the cost associated with those improvements is needed. Because to include cabinets and counters, what else? You know, that's obviously 50,000 is probably not just cabinets and counters. So we're asking in our questions if we can get basically some type of line item detail or something similar of this projected expenses, because that's 50,000 should be a scopable number given those, you know, type of figures. Second question would be, how would the functionality of the facility itself be improved with these? I mean, to some extent, several of us have been to the senior center, so we know that it's in need of some dressing, to put it mildly. But specifically, it's not in the justification what is being improved and how will that improve the facility. And the third question is, will the facility be fully functional in 2015 if these improvements were not done? I mean, does the facility close down if we don't do these? What's the negative side cost? In general, though, everyone was pretty much, you know, appreciating this facility and wants to support it. We just really had some questions to make sure that we're spending the money in a wise way to provide for the future use of either that facility or a facility of its sort. In terms of the Greenway low water crossing replacement, in general, the citizens at this meeting agreed that they are unsafe, you know, especially with the debris and the mud, et cetera, and that safety issues needed to be addressed. Some even, you know, mentioned that this has been an item that's been on the CIP or in some form or another for several cycles. And that in itself could possibly be adding to our liability, because it indicates that we've known about this issue for a while. So our questions really come down to, is it possible to separate the two water crossings into 2 different years, or does that all have to be done in 2015? And if it does, is it because of the cost savings or other synergies that are going on with doing it all at the same time? Would dividing that greatly affect cost, and if so, how much? And we would like feedback from you, because while we can guess about the degree of liability the city faces, that's really what city staff and attorneys should be able to probably give us feedback on, about what further justifies replacing these from a liability standpoint. In general, pretty much everyone agreed that these probably do need to be replaced. There's no doubt that from a safety issue, we don't want anyone hurt. And we just have a few questions to make sure, again, that we're doing it wisely. The last item under Parks and Rec was the 2015 anyway, was the West Side Park improvements. This probably generated the most discussion among the 2015 Parks and Rec stuff. And we really weren't able to support these improvements at this time based on the questions that we've got. And some of those questions may change that feeling, but the real issue is this seems like something that maybe needs to be looked at a little bit more deeply. Have we had any in-depth discussion to expanding the Celebration Park location instead of this? Because part of the justification for this project at Westside, was about how there's a large number of league and tournament games and we're at capacity, except this doesn't increase capacity. So the justification doesn't seem to match why we're spending $700,000, $600,000 on updating Westside. No new fields, no new parking. Another question on this particular one was, there's 64,000 labeled as prior, I guess, spent on this project. Is that the cost of engineering an architect for the proposed project going forward, or we'd like to get feedback as to what that 64,000 that's already prior spent was? And the third question is, if the project is not funded in 2015 or 16, will activities at this location continue, or will the park just be closed? In general, which is in our comments, is before we spend $700,000 to do something that doesn't really even match justification for spending $700,000, we think we have to do a lot more, or you all need to do a lot more internal analysis and discussion about why we're doing that, and whether that money might be better spent somewhere else actually addressing what those justification statements were. And with that, I think someone else is coming up to talk about the other facilities.
Thanks, Bruce.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I wanted to first off thank Mr. Warren. Sorry, I butchered your name. I'm here to talk about the Police and Justice Center. We are in agreement that you do need a new police station, him being the interim police chief. If you've been there, I'm guessing you all have, it's horrible. I'm sorry you have to work in that kind of environment in Gardner, of all places. Citizens of Gardner, there's a couple questions we have, not just the group that was met, like Debbie said. There's supposedly a study that had been, or is going to happen, that was approved under the 2015 budget. From what I learned from Mr. Worm, the studies should be grouped in with the CIP budget. So why has that been allocated or already approved for the 2015 budget when it could be included in this? And who's contracted? Who's going to do the study? Could you please explain the type of information that we'll have at the end of this study? And personally, what other cities is that study going to look at? Like, I don't know, throwing out Belton, or what surrounding cities that we have around us could we go look at to emulate or be like, instead of the hole they're stuck in right now? If you can, please share the sources for expenditures listed for the CIP in 2015 and 16. And as a whole, or we as the citizens, the 32 got together, we fully support the new police chief, or new building. Sorry. Thanks for your time.
Hey, Clint?
Yes, sir.
Quick, name and address for the record.
Clint Barney, 136 North Cedar Street.
Thank you, Clint.
You're welcome.
Steve McNair, 528 North Elm, Gardner. Had a couple of questions and comments on traffic light signals at Lincoln Lane and Moonlight. First off, the citizens in attendance of these meetings acknowledge the difficulty turning on from Moonlight from Lincoln Lane. Had a couple of questions. Could you please explain what the $17,000 figure that was labeled prior refers to? It was a little unclear. Have we received confirmation from CARS on the intent of their 50% contribution in construction costs? And what would the amount they would be contributing be? Given the close proximity to the Moonlight and main major intersection, are you concerned with being able to find the right timing for these lights so that turning on to the Moonlight from Main Street will not be adversely affected? could you please explain how or if this intersection would impact a future site for signals at the new Casey's at Moonlight and Madison? Just some general comments. This appears to be the only solution to the traffic issue that created this dislocation due to the prior design. And also, we wanted to talk about the ADA upgrades. We believe the $80,000 from the community block grant, the city's portion will be $20,000 with up to $10,000 from in-kind services. Repairs will be made in 2015. Citizens in attendance are 100% behind this project. Couple of questions. Will we continue to address ADA upgrades? And what is planned for 2016 and beyond? Where will we find the info? Will we apply for a community block grant in 2015 for the funding in 2016 for additional ADA upgrades? And comment, we'd like to see the future plan, or see the plan for the future. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Lee Moore. I live at 521 East Dogwood Street. And I have the easy one to talk about, the electric stuff. And I will say I'm here basically on behalf of the group. I take part in the group not as a member of the EUAB, but just as a normal citizen concerned about the state of the police department and the parks and rec and other things. But I got chosen to talk about the electric because I'm familiar. I did confer with Mr. Green. He gave me a lot of good information to take back to the group to kind of give a little bit more background, maybe a little more layman's terms on some of these projects. There were still some questions that the group had that I was not able to address. And we understand, for example, that there are 3 projects in this in 2015 for the electric system, 3 that are closely related, those being the replace the gas regulator valve, the generator control upgrade, and the fuel regulator upgrade. All 3 of those have to be done together. So that's sort of understood. And there was generally there was no objection to doing any of the electric upgrades. So the questions were for specifically on replacing T1. The consensus of the citizens attending the meeting is that we understand and support the necessity of this project. Our only questions are with the timing and funding. Is there a 5-year capital plan for Gardner Energy? I'll be honest, when this capital improvement plan was submitted to the Electric Utility Advisory Board, it was just a review. They stood up and I believe it was Mr. Wolf that gave us a kind of a brief rundown on it, and there was no vote or anything to approve it or anything like that. It was just to review it. So that was my first look at it. In fact, that was on September 4th. So the questions are, please explain the $50,000 figure labeled as prior. There's some prior, I take it that there was a prior investment in probably in the 2014 budget, and I think the feeling was that it would be really nice to have that explained in the CIP, so that anybody that looks at it can see why we've already spent $50,000 and why there's actually some more to be spent. Please explain what funds make up the electric fund. Does the electric fund refer to the 2 reserve funds established by the EUB? And this project is indicating the funding source to be the electric fund, yet is labeled debt. Is this correct? And then why is it not cash if it's coming from the electric fund? Second one I'll talk about is the sub 1 improvements. The questions were pretty simple. The consensus of the citizens attending the meeting is that we understand and support the necessity of this project. Our only questions are with timing and funding. Again, they want an explanation of the $50,000 figure is labeled as prior. And could you explain why the project is divided over 2 years? Why can't we do it all in 1 year? The next one is the generator control upgrade. This was another one, of course, that was supported. Citizens just want to know why it's split over 2 years. And same with the fuel regulator upgrade. And Pioneer Feeder Project, citizens in attendance at this meeting understand and support the necessity of this project. And I don't believe there's any question on that one. The final one was the sub-4 land acquisition. And the thought process is basically the question, what was it? Why are we doing it in 2016 as opposed to 2015? Is there something, is there some reason that we did that? And it would be good to have that in, as part of the capital improvement plan, just documented so people can see that. And I believe that's all.
There's Rebuild Parma and Filter Media, the last page.
Yeah, Rebuild Parma, that was the last electric. This one, again, it was supported, but they want to know, does the proposed work in 2016 complete the Parma rebuild? And this is the one where we're basically building in some reliability to Parma, because it's one of the areas that suffers the most whenever we have lightning storm or whatever. If not, could you please outline the scope of the work that remains and the years and cost to complete? And then I'll go ahead and go over the filter media on the water. Nobody at the meeting had any kind of argument against filtering the water. That's pretty important. We all like good tasting water, and the consensus of the citizens attending the meeting was that we understand and support the necessity of this project. But in what year will filter media replacement again be earmarked as a CIP project? Was the only question. That's all. There may be other citizens that have separate concerns within the group, but.
Understood.
Okay, thank you for listening to us for that little portion. We respectfully request that you continue to table the vote on the CIP. We look forward to receiving a written response to our questions and maybe some of our requests for documents. We envision another possibility of a work session dedicated to, once we have these answers, to talking about that. We're planning to continue to meet and discuss the remaining proposed CIP for 16 through 19, and we'll provide our questions and comments in the same kind of written form. I'm kind of just wondering if in the past years the CIP was simply considered a wish list and maybe not a serious planning document due to lack of funding or such. But now that there is some money in play, we need to give this complete 2015-19 proposed CIP the due diligence it deserves. Approval for this CIP signals the immediate start of a few projects. Together as a city and citizens, let's get it right. Thanks for listening to us tonight. We truly appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Debbie. Discussion from the governing body. I know that now that we all received this, and Debbie, thank you for providing this for us.
I'm sorry it was so late. We wanted to get the most up-to-date, accurate information and response from our group. So we hope to be much more forthcoming earlier to things that we have like this.
And I'm glad that people from your group have decided to step forward and help represent part of what you guys discussed. Is there anybody else in attendance that has comments or questions regarding the CIP that they would like to offer or share? I can tell you this has been distributed to all of the council members. Debbie, I didn't know who you'd sent it to or not, so.
I just sent it to council members and mayor.
Oh, okay, not knowing that, I had Jeannie send it back out to all the council members. I sent it to the city administrator, who shared it with director level staff. In some cases, some of this, as much as we appreciate and like seeing, Jay Belcher over there holding down the top lawman, position, around the dais, we do anticipate hiring a new police chief sometime soon. Some of those questions are probably going to be, things that we need to address with the new hire. Same thing for utility director, which is a position that we're currently trying to get filled. I know that you all have seen the planning schedule, and one of the things that in talking to people here in City Hall just this afternoon after receiving this, was, maybe we have some kind of much more interactive group type meeting, similar to the CPAC meeting that we had in the lobby, where we split people up, had them at tables, had people, people had an opportunity to interact with their fellow citizens. In this case, maybe with some staff and council, governing body members. We're really wanting to think outside the box on something like this. And again, I just can't say enough about how thrilled we are that, the last time we had this many people in city council chambers, it was because of Blazer the miniature horse, I think. And this is a much more serious subject than that. And we're glad that there's so many people that are interested. But, my guess is that staff is going to be getting to work on some of these questions that you have. We ought to be able to provide some answers for those things. And this gives us a good idea of how to plan for upcoming meetings, and allow us an opportunity to work on plant assessments, and pavement assessments, and all the other things that are detailed in the capital planning schedule. And there again, these are things that are going to be presented. There will be ample opportunity for public comment anytime some of these things are presented. Additionally, some of the things that were identified in here, maybe some of these are, just speaking from experience, is, some of these, we're not gonna get down to the granular type level on some things. We're going to, that's going to come after bids have been taken or RFPs have been issued, designs have been completed. So, while I, for one, understand people's thirst for knowledge, sometimes they come as part of the process and not all at the beginning of it. And the last thing that I would like to say before I open it up to any of the other council members who would like to speak about it, is that, none of these things are going to happen without bids being taken and discussions being had. Sometimes it's going to be with some form of utility board, sometimes it might be with the planning commission. It's certainly going to take part as part of council action items. Nothing is going to get approved, and the money of the taxpayers is not going to be spent until due diligence has been adequately done. And with that said, I'll shut up and see if there's anybody else up here that would like to say anything.
Oh, I'll start. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say, I think this is an excellent example of citizen involvement. I'm very impressed by all the questions. I have faith that the staff is going to get the questions answered quickly And, I think this is a great first step. Thank you.
Keith, do you have anything you want to add?
No, you know, the only thing I will add is just to your point, and also it's in follow-up to Clint's question, just to make sure the understanding, the CIP is not an approval of a budget in any way. It doesn't commit to the expenditure of a single dollar, except for a very few small circumstances where we're committing to a project that might fall below the city administrator's purchasing level. Everything else will be fully vetted within the council chambers and other spots. So I want to make sure that's understood by everyone that though it's within here and there's commitment to a project, it's not dollar commitment by actually authorizing the CIP plan. And I think that's a key difference because it comes before us, all of these with more vetted plans, more vetted budgets, and they'll be part of budgets, and that's where dollars will be actually talked about in more detail, but then the individual project planning itself will come before us. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that. And hopefully that, Clint, answers your question a little bit when we talked about the dollar side of it.
Speak up, Debbie.
I don't understand what you just said. I don't mean to be rude. I don't know what you were addressing with Clint, so I was confused.
Sure. Well, Clint mentioned CIP budget, an approved CIP budget. Basically, the approval of a budget as a whole. That by voting on a CIP that includes, let's just use, as an example, it's one of the things Bruce talked about, West Side Park enhancements. That's not approval of the dollars committed to that plan. That has to come before the council a second time. That's commitment to that project in some form or fashion, but even with that, it doesn't greenlight the project in any way. Does that make better sense?
No, I understand what you're saying, but there are some things that, in speaking with, Brian and speaking with, Jeff, that they're waiting for the CIP approval so that some things can immediately take place. One being the, west side, maintenance and construction, and another being the facility study for the police station.
Well.
And so that's the way it was explained to me. So when it's in here like this, that's how we took it. They were waiting for approval of the CIP to be able to begin some of those first initial steps now.
And you've got the floor, or Christie.
Well, I was just gonna say, a good example, the facility space study is part of the CIP plan. It's been a part of it as a unique item itself. And we approved that in the budget for next year. So we are, I mean, that money's been set aside to move forward with the facility study. So I think what he's trying to get to is that, and I'll let Jeff speak to the West Side Park, but everything, I mean, even West Side Park would come before us and say, Jeff would say, hey, here's what we wanna do, here's kind of the specs that we're putting together, we're gonna send it out to bid, and do we have your approval to do it?
Right.
I was just told that the $45,000 facility study was added as an update to the 2014 budget.
Right.
Okay, and would have been approved at the time the 15 budget went through. So, does that mean that has to come back before that's done? So that's where our point is that in approving a CIP, right now, there are some things that would immediately be able to move forward, one being the facility study, because it's already been approved as part of the 2014 revised budget.
Yeah, but that.
Now, if we're understanding this wrong, please tell us.
Well, yeah, I mean, the budget number has been approved, okay? The expenditure still has to come across.
So it'll come back through to you all.
Yes, it has
as a
to, because it's an
$45,000
appropriation. There's a difference between, there's a
Okay.
difference between a set aside and an appropriation. Appropriation is where you actually spend the money.
Okay.
And if it's not, if it's above that authorized expenditure
It's gonna
level
come
for
right back
department
and
heads
flow
and the
through you
city
guys.
administrator,
Okay.
has to come before us.
So the $45,000 one will come back before you. What is it 25,000 or below that does not?
Okay, that's correct.
I'm sorry.
Well, and some of that depends on, the city administrator has signature authority on stuff, on things below 25,000. But there are some things that come in below 25,000 that she would still need approval from council.
Bruce, I'm sorry that I have interrupted you several times.
Get up here, just, in general, though, answering Keith's question, at least from my personal understanding, one of the concerns I had, and why I got involved with the CIP project, had to do precisely with the 4-hour marathon session, city council budget session. where we were repeatedly told over and over and over again, if we wanted to erase these issues, you had to do it earlier in the process. Get more involved. Become part of the overall budget process. So to now say, don't worry about it, this is just CIP, kind of conflicts with a little bit of that.
You completely misheard, Bruce. That's not the case at all. Getting involved now and asking the question absolutely is the way the process works. But it's the clarity to make sure that understanding that the CIP does not dictate the large expenditures and authorize that to be taking place.
No, but it does set that direction.
Well, it's
that
committed
are-
to
that
a
are-
project that we think is beneficial, absolutely.
Right, but that Laura kept coming here and saying, you all set the direction, you all set the priority. That's what the CIP is. And that's why I'm saying, it does directly affect the budget process, because it's the defense of all those budget priorities that were so strongly fought in that long session.
It's part and parcel, yes. Now, we can open this up for comments and questions after the council meeting, but at 7 o'clock, we've got a council meeting scheduled to start, and we're going to abide by the agendas that were set forth. So, you know, after we adjourn from council meeting, if there's still people here that want to continue the discussion, I think we've got commitment from the council members in attendance to hang tight and continue to discuss. But I think we've got a lot of good, information that we can work with, and that, the governing body and staff and in conjunction in the future with our citizens, we're gonna be able to do an awful lot with, so. With that being the case, it's 7:01 in Gardner, so I'm gonna call Gardner City Council to order. And invite everybody to please stand and join us in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance